Welcome to Black House Tales. Let's begin our story. Entry 1. We were brought here by the military, the 2 men and 1 woman accompanying me. Resistance was futile as they had drugged me with psychotropic drugs at the clinic. They were so powerful that any attempt at escaping was quashed. As soon as we arrived, we were placed in solitary cells, with only a dim red light bulb, covered by a steel lattice lampshade, as the source of light. The walls were made of damp and depressing gray concrete, with no windows to offer any hope or reprieve. The heavy steel door, painted a dark green, seemed to taunt us with despair. The cell was bare, with only a metal bed bolted to the floor in the left corner and a rusty toilet bowl in the right corner. There was no sink, no table, and no other furniture or household items. I was dragged in, uncaringly thrown on the floor, and left alone as the door slammed shut. I lay still for a long time, listening to the sound of my own wheezing breath. The powerful drug made it impossible for me to figure out why we had been brought here or what their intentions were. Fear gripped me, a primal and indescribable terror that I could not shake off. Each time I tried to think logically, my mind was clouded, and a sharp headache accompanied each clearing of consciousness. It felt like an eternity before I finally regained my senses. I was like a wild animal trapped in a cage, my hospital clothes stained with dried blood, and my skin covered in bruises and abrasions. I attempted to rise to my feet, but my body refused to obey me. Each time I tried, I fell to the cold, musty-smelling floor, crying out in despair. It took every last bit of strength I had to crawl to the bed, where I collapsed onto the damp but soft mattress, instantly passing out. I had terrible nightmares for what felt like an eternity, and I am certain I must have been screaming in my sleep. When I finally woke up, my clothes were drenched in sweat. Under the mattress, I found a small, old notebook and a pencil, which I used to jot down everything that happened to me in hopes of making sense of why I was here and what was going on. Entry 2. I was once a patient in a closed psychiatric clinic for the hopelessly ill, hidden away from society by a small, shady spruce forest. Here, I was relentlessly treated for the obsessive hallucinations that had plagued me since childhood. The clinic was where all the lunatics who were considered dangerous by society were taken, and I was one of them. After brutally murdering my mother in a severe hallucinatory delirium and dismembering her body, I was brought here by the police, who found me at the scene of the elaborate murder. However, I have no memory of that horrible evening. A forensic psychiatric examination deemed me insane and admitted me to the clinic, where I was given various drugs and permanently tied to the bed at night. I never tried to resist this, knowing full well that I was seriously ill. I feared that I might do something terrible again, out of control. Thanks to the medication, my hallucinations had practically stopped, and my mind was slowly regaining consciousness. I was even allowed rare walks around the grounds and sometimes managed to talk to one of the nursing staff. I spent a year in the hospital, but one night, everything changed. 2 sturdy orderlies woke me up and ordered me to accompany them to the chief physician's office. Once in the corridor, one of them opened the door leading to the stairwell with a 3-edged key. We went upstairs, and I found myself in an office, but the chief physician was not there. Instead, 4 armed men in military uniform, their faces concealed by balaclavas, met me. The orderlies left, and one of the soldiers shone something red in my face while the other 2 grabbed my arms. The 4th soldier stabbed a syringe into my neck, and I lost consciousness. When I woke up, I found myself in the back of a truck filled with a phosphorescent reddish mist. 3 other bodies, 2 men and a woman, lay next to me, all wearing the same hospital clothes I was wearing. They were all unconscious, likely injected too. The van shook and swayed, and I could hear the engine running dynamically. They were taking us somewhere. I looked around, trying to understand what was happening, but my mind became foggy again. The next events were already being recalled as if in a dream. The doors of the van opened, and a harsh red spotlight blinded me. The military pulled us out, breaking my arms, and leading me for a long time through long corridors. Finally, the cell door swung open, and I painfully fell to the floor. Throughout the entire ordeal, the military did not utter a single word or give any commands. They acted according to a well-coordinated, well-established pattern. An icy terror gripped me as I realized that this place seemed unreal, like the nightmare of a maniac, mad with murder and blood. Entry 3. The red light bulb above the door seemed to pulse with an ominous intensity, casting a dark shadow over my body as I rose from the bed. I couldn't tell how long I had been trapped in this place, days maybe? My throat burned with thirst, and a strange humming sound, like the roar of a monstrous engine, echoed through the air. It seemed to be coming from somewhere deep below me, and every time it started up, the floor trembled beneath my feet. As I lay there, the thought crept into my mind that I might have died and been sent to some twisted purgatory. But fleeting moments of clarity dispelled this delusion, forcing me to confront the terrifying reality of my situation. In my journal, I scribbled my observations, trying to make sense of the surreal nightmare I found myself in. But my thoughts were interrupted by a sound unlike anything I had ever heard before. It was a scraping, scratching noise, like 1,000 tiny claws raking over the wooden door. My heart pounding in my chest, I crept towards the door, trying to make out the source of the noise. The red light above grew brighter and brighter, until it was impossible to keep my eyes open. And then, just as suddenly, the noise stopped. But the silence that followed was deafening. I could hear the blood rushing in my ears, feel my body shaking with fear. And then, without warning, I screamed. A primal, gut-wrenching scream that echoed through the empty room. And just as suddenly as the noise had started, it stopped. The red light faded back to its dim glow, and I was left alone with my terror. But it wasn't over yet. A feeling of nausea overwhelmed me, and I stumbled to the side of the bed, retching violently. And there, in the midst of my vomit, writhed a giant white centipede, its many legs churning through the sickening slurry. I knew then that I was trapped in a nightmare from which there was no escape. And as the red light flickered above me, I closed my eyes and prayed for the dawn to come. Entry 5. I was lying prone on the cold concrete floor, completely helpless, when the door suddenly swung open with a creak. I heard nothing of the sort, no click of the lock or turn of the key, and that in itself filled me with dread. 4 figures entered the room, their faces shrouded by black balaclavas, and I immediately recognized them. It was the same quartet that had picked me up from the clinic, with their identical builds and movements. Their camouflage uniforms were stained in the same places, as if they were clones from an old video game. I couldn't help but wonder if they were some sort of twisted personal convoy of mine. Just like before, they blinded me with a red light before throwing me to the floor and ripping off my hospital gown. My heart pounded with fear as I saw one of the military men brandishing a scalpel. I thrashed around, cursing and screaming, but they remained silent as they tried to pin me down. In my desperation, I reached out and tore the balaclava from one of their faces. What I saw beneath it made my blood run cold. It was not human, that much was certain. Its head was completely white and slick, with no discernible features, no curves, no hair, no ears or nose or lips. Its small, shiny black eyes were fixed on me, and the strip of a mouth opened to reveal small, pointed teeth. I was frozen in terror for a moment, then I twisted and grabbed the hand holding the scalpel. In my panic, I yanked back so hard that the hand was torn off completely. But the horror didn't end there. The creatures began kicking and beating me, inflicting very real pain. I threw the plastic mannequin hand away in disgust and scrambled to my feet, making a run for the door. I stumbled and fell repeatedly, but the thought of escaping that nightmare gave me the strength to keep going. As I ran down the dark, never-ending corridor, I spotted a red and warm light at the end. Something deep inside me compelled me to head towards it, despite the unknown danger it might hold. I finally reached the source of the light, a cell that looked exactly like the one I was being held in. The door was ajar, and I cautiously entered. In the corner of the room lay a man, one of the group that had been brought here with me. He was dead, with the first signs of decomposition already showing on his face. But the most grotesque part was the movement I saw in his mouth, a disgusting, slippery centipede crawling out from between his lips. It quickly arched around the left side of his face and disappeared into the back of his head. And then I noticed it. His whole body was infested with these things, crawling up his arms, under his clothes, and out into the light. I recoiled in disgust, eager to leave that place as quickly as possible. But before I could take a step, something strong hit me from behind, and I felt a sharp prick in my neck. My consciousness faded, and I crumpled to the ground. Final entry. This will be my final entry. They brought me back to my cell before I could fully comprehend the horror that awaited me. Nightmares haunted me until the sound of footsteps and a man's desperate cries interrupted my slumber. He begged for mercy, screaming about being eaten alive. They passed by my cell, his voice becoming fainter with each step until all that remained was the echo of his terror. I have accepted my fate, knowing that I won't leave this place alive. My only hope is that this journal will one day be found by the right hands. Maybe then, the truth about what is happening in this godforsaken place will come to light. And perhaps, just perhaps, no one else will have to suffer the same fate as I have within these walls. I hope you enjoyed this story. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next one. Thanks for watching.